Okay, hello and greetings to everyone in the room. We are now recording, and fingers crossed, technological hiccups aside, the recording will be available to view later. My name is Martin Lipscomb, and today, Associate Professor in the University of Victoria School of Nursing, Olga Petrovskaya discusses her excellent book published with Routledge in 2023, Nursing Theory, Postmodernism, Post-Structuralism and Foucault. Now, in my view, this is a remarkable book. Building on the work of Mark Reichjord and others, Olga offers a persuasive and a provocative history of American nursing theory. Accessible, insightful and decidedly feisty, the book maps key features of nursing's intellectual history over the last 60 plus years. Olga unpacks the role played by nurse theorists in detrimentally moulding crucial features of that history, and while her target is American nursing theory, the arguments presented have wide resonance and big implications. Indeed, arguments in the book challenge nurses wherever they are located, and the work is, I'd contend, not therefore parochial in character. Olga's book contributes to an increasing body of sophisticated and articulate critiques of nurse scholarship and leadership, which, if taken seriously, might productively move the discipline of nursing forward. Okay, I will in a second hand over to Olga, who will describe and outline her work, and then we will take questions. Now, for anyone unfamiliar with this platform, you should see two left-facing chevrons in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. And if you click on these, you have access to the chat facility. So feel free to use the chat function. And when we come to questions, you can either submit your question via that button, that facility, or raise an electronic hand and I'll unmute you. And the electronic hand is or should be located in the middle of the screen when you wiggle your cursor. Right, Olga, over to you. I will now put up the PowerPoint. Good. You should have that now. You should have control.
Yes, thank you very much, Martin. Yes, I can see PowerPoint, and we established that audio and video are working fine, so I will proceed. First of all, thank you, Martin, for organizing this event, and thank you everyone for joining. It's a great pleasure to present on this platform and to talk about my book. The title of the book is on this slide, and let me move forward. I would like to start with University of Victoria Territory acknowledgement. We acknowledge and respect the Lekwungen, Songhes, and Esquimalt peoples on whose territory the university stands, and the Lekwungen Saanich peoples whose historical relationships with the land continue to this day. At the moment, I'm in Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, and so I would like to acknowledge this land as well. Acknowledgements related to my book. Obviously, this is writing a book, as I learned, is a huge undertaking, and the book arises from several years of my PhD work. Mary Ellen Perkis and Bruce and Stephen Ross are people from my supervisory committee. Mary Ellen Perkis was my PhD supervisor and is and Bruce, both of them are my academic mentors to this day. Madeline Walker, who has a PhD in English, provided amazing editorial assistance. And Mark Reichjord, John Paley, Derek Selman, names well familiar in the nursing philosophy circles, are individuals who were kind enough to read my entire dissertation early on after it was finished, but before when I was playing with the idea of writing a book, and they read the entire dissertation and provided comments. So any divergences is my own fault because each of these individuals provided amazing comments, but I have taken up those that I felt were most important to advance my ideas. Martin Lipscomb is on this slide because, Martin, you have been successful in publishing books, and your suggestion of how easy it may be to make a first step to contact the publisher and how to start this work was instrumental for me. Also, I would like to acknowledge University of Victoria and School of Nursing funding that enabled me to publish, in particular, the first chapter of this book in open access, and I'll talk about it on the next slide. And I would like to thank numerous other individuals whose work is cited in this book. So open access, chapter 1 in open access can be found on the Routledge website. And at this point, so what I would like to do while I'm still on this slide, I would like to, before this event, I was rereading the book, and I found a couple of sentences on the very last page of the book that I think will help the reader not yet familiar with the book to understand what was it about. So the main purpose of my study was to understand how the intellectual landscape of the nursing discipline has shaped and continues to shape a recognition and reception of continental philosophical scholarship, specifically nursing writings informed by postmodern and post-structural theory. Within this scholarly landscape, I attended to the distinctive but sometimes overlapping discourses of nursing science, qualitative research, and nursing philosophy. I argued that certain assumptions and discursive constructs mobilized within American conceptions of theory leave little room for continentally informed nursing scholarship, particularly those ideas skeptical of humanistic and emancipatory agendas. Continental theorizing in nursing produced numerous clinically significant and textually interesting analyses. They, however, may not fit the frame of nursing science and nursing theory, a genre of qualitative research, or certain forms of nursing philosophy. And this creates a problem. Some exciting scholarship in the discipline of nursing might not be noticed, may be invisible and unintelligible. So let me proceed. I'm continuing to describe the book overall. What is it? What is the approach? I don't think I mentioned in the book, I don't call my approach as case study, but it occurs to me now that it can be described as a case study indeed. I'm looking at a specific time period from the late 80s when the first references to postmodernism and post-structuralism appeared in nursing journals, to the early 2000s, and in some instances up to 2010. So this 20-25 year period when references to and articles informed by postmodern and post-structural theory were appearing in nursing journals and started to be noticeable in the nursing philosophical theoretical landscape. I'm looking specifically at a slice of nursing scholarship that explicitly self-identified as nursing theory or philosophy and cited postmodernism, post-structuralism, Michel Foucault as its influences. I would like to say right away that the above terms like theory and philosophy or postmodernism, post-structuralism, Foucault, French theory are used interchangeably in the book. And this reflects the usage I see in nursing literature. Authors are not stuck on delineating this among these categories, but rather cite a variety of authors who span any of these categories. Another point I made early, starting reading this literature and thinking about my analysis, I thought that it will not be productive to compare how nurse authors use Foucault, what they take from Foucault's work, versus how Michel Foucault's work is used and cited in social sciences or humanities. These are two different Foucaults, or maybe even more than two. However, what I thought will be productive and interesting is to see how Foucault is cited within the nursing literature itself. And here was plenty ground for comparison and comparison among between American nursing literature, a specific part of it that called itself American nursing science, unique disciplinary nursing science and nursing theory, and other other examples of nursing literature developed outside of United States that were not so much interested or citing American nursing science and nursing theory. So the contrast is between how Foucault in particular has been cited and in those two bodies of writings. What I thought I would like to bring up early in this presentation is not what is necessarily in the book, but when now, like 1-2 years later, I am rereading the book, and what questions now stand out for me as relevant for some types of work I'm doing right now in the moment. So I said, what's for us today in this case study that is kind of removed chronologically from us a little bit, but also is on a specific topic. However, as Martin mentioned, implications and conclusions are far-reaching and are applicable to other areas of nursing scholarship. So I will just give 3 examples, and they might not be immediately, I will explain what I mean. So I think this is quite uncontroversial. I think questions that this book asks us to consider: what is nursing? How to best understand nursing practice? How to represent nursing practice in our accounts? And what counts as nursing knowledge? So more than anything, I perceive this opportunity for me to do a book launch is an invitation for each of you to look into this book and read it and think about these examples and consider the criticisms I provide in light of these questions. So I'll show 3 slides, as I said, something that is on my mind at the moment, which arises from the book, but is applicable, for example, for me at the right now. What I have seen in the literature, so I my apologies. Of course, this conversation presupposes that audience is somewhat familiar with who Foucault is and his work, and so that can count in the book and in other sources. I will have to assume that there is some understanding of key ideas. But one of Foucault's key notions is governmentality, or conducting the conduct of others, or controlling what others do, controlling the behavior of others. And this is one of the examples how power manifests in contemporary society. At the end of the 20th century, let's see, when he was writing in what he called disciplinary society, Foucault was not interested in power on a large scale, when some powerful entities are centralizing power in their hands, saying no, power that is repressive. That was not what Foucault was interested in. He was interested in the microphysics of power, the capillary manifestations of power, how it works in everyday encounters. And so governmentality is one of the concepts, one of his key concepts, and it has been applied skillfully in some nursing writings to indicate that nurses interactions with the patients is how our power manifests in contemporary societies, because what health professionals do is conducting the conduct of others. And however, what was interesting for me to see that in some American nursing literature, Foucault's concept of governmentality was misread and been taken up not as a criticism, as a jarring point to realize, oh, we are helping professionals, and yet we are very powerful in that sense. We are directing the behavior of others. And so this moment of standing back and reflecting and maybe taking something forward to understand something about us as helping professionals and about nursing practice. But in this example of nursing writings, governmentality was suggested as a useful nursing theory applicable for public health nursing. So from a point of criticism to saying, oh, how great this is, let's make it into a formal nursing theory for public health nursing. Another example I wanted to give is that, again, Margaret Sandelovsky is just one particular scholar whose work I really enjoy. And she has been, many of her writings, they can be classified as theoretical, and yet they have never been included in the canon of American nursing theory textbooks. So the question for me was, how come we developed certain categories, ways to think that these are theorists and these are not nursing theorists. And so that's just an illustration of how categories can be very fixed and having lasting effects on what we perceive is a legitimate nursing scholarship or knowledge. And final example is, now we can see in the nursing literature more references to non-humanist theoretical perspectives. This is often mistaken to something as is against humane relationships towards patients. This is absolutely wrong. Non-humanist perspectives do not position a human at the top of the hierarchy of life, right? And so these are indigenous worldviews, different socio-material theories, which, for example, put on a symmetrical plane humans and non-human beings. And so I was just wondering whether through the lens of Western humanism that dominates American nursing theory in particular, whether those theories will be intelligible. So that's what I'm reading the book right now. I was thinking about these three issues. Now, let me briefly show you what's the content of the book and just indicate what's in each chapter, possibly to pique interest, to invite the attendees to read the book. So the first chapter is called Early 21st Century Canadian Nursing at a Theoretical Crossroads Between American Nursing Theory and British Australian Post-Structural Theorizing. So my goal in this chapter was to position myself. And what I said was that I described my educational experiences in Canada when I have been an undergraduate nursing student in a few different institutions in Ontario, and then I was a master's student, and kind of how I was exposed to what is considered theory, what is considered discipline-specific nursing knowledge in American disciplinary literature. And here was a big disjuncture I identified, kind of going through these different educational programs in Canada. I will go quickly through the slides, partly in the interest of time, but this is one of the most striking examples. I was, as a student, introduced to something called unique nursing knowledge, and Jacqueline Fawcett's work, and this is an example of her work, is one example. That's how, as a student, I was introduced to what is nursing knowledge. Nursing knowledge has a structure. It looks in a very hierarchical way. There are components, there are formal terminology. There's formal terminology used to talk about discipline-specific nursing knowledge and theory. And here is a quote from Fawcett. I invite you to read it. This is one of the most illustrative quotes, I would say. Clearly, it says, do not use any other theories that are not developed within our nursing discipline and adheres to a specific prescriptive format and terminology for how it should look and what it should address. So that was part of my exposure. On the other hand, I started attending International Philosophy of Nursing conferences as a graduate student, and I encountered a completely different talk about theory in nursing. John Drummond was a co-founder of International Philosophy of Nursing Society and was very much interested in continental philosophy. And here is what John Drummond says about borrowing theories from other disciplines. So we can see conflict, a huge disagreement on something as important as what is nursing knowledge. And this was a starting point for me. This juncture, when you bring these quotes together, I think it's a powerful starting place for asking what is going on. In chapter 2, I describe how I use terminology, I describe my approach, and I partly already have done it when I talked about case study and what is it that I studied. Here again, this slide just shows that time period, lists key postmodernism, post-structuralist notions that I see when I read nursing scholarship that claims these influences, and I list some nursing journals that were central in publishing these articles: Journal of Advanced Nursing, Nursing Inquiry, Nursing Philosophy, and American Advances in Nursing Science. So basically, I explain my methodology, what and how I did in the book. Then in chapter 3, I go into a very important work and summarize Mark Riesjort's work. Mark Riesjort and his book published in 2010 that played a significant role in shaping my thinking, in helping me to understand what is it that is going on in American nursing theory, in American nursing theoretical literature that shapes the discourse, shapes what terminology is used, what areas are considered legitimate for exploration, and so on. So Mark Riesjorts, being a philosopher of science, delved into the body of literature produced in American nursing theory movement over the 60 years, a long period of time, and he discovered that actually American nursing theory, and one illustrative example, what I have shown earlier, Jacqueline Fawcett's work as one example, that this whole thinking is deeply immersed into the logical positivism, mid-20th century philosophy of science that is outdated and has been rejected in the philosophy of science. But without being aware of it, nurse theorists have taken up in their writings and in their thinking this erroneous understanding of what is science and what is theory. So Mark Rishjord criticizes American nursing theory for believing that the science should be structured as a pyramid with levels of theory familiar to all of us, from grand theory to middle range theory to practice theory, and these levels of theory progress based on the level of abstraction, that there is a hierarchical structure, that there is such notion as unique nursing science, which is against borrowed theory, that all science is divided into paradigms, and paradigms are believed to be theory, method, and ontology that comes as a package, and paradigms are incommensurable. And so these are key criticisms of Rishjord that helped me read American nursing literature citing postmodernism and post-structuralism and see how what is so interesting about this French theory is being completely omitted, but only selective concepts that could fit into the structure of the science were taken up. I'll give you a second to read this slide. So I used this notion, the matrix of intelligibility or unintelligibility, to help me formulate my idea about how the understanding of nursing science based in the logical positivism, outdated philosophy of science, as Rishjord argued, how this frame, how these optics guided nurses to only selectively read all other wider philosophical literature, in particular continental philosophy. Then in chapters 4 and 5, I will not go in detail. Those are very detailed analysis of how postmodern and post-structural ideas appeared in American nursing literature. I describe the work of Susan Gortner, Laura Zurich, Pamela Reed, Jean Watson, and talk about journal Nursing Science Quarterly. And then I also analyze how Advances in Nursing Science journal. And these are very important journals in the American theoretical landscape. I looked at how these journals came to be, what the mandate was, and what is each of these journals' relation to American nursing theory. They are very different. Each of these authors listed, you see the different names. They have all come from different perspectives, but there is a unifying feature. And they all cited Foucault and postmodern ideas in a very different ways. But regardless of their individual differences, the background was always the same. The concern and the desire to link all the concepts they bring from postmodernism to bolster the established ideas of American nursing science, that it should be unique to the nursing, it should be very cautious of borrowing theories from other disciplines, it should uphold the structure, grand theories to practice-oriented theories, and use very formal language, indeed use this terminology always to talk about it. And so I invite you to delve into these chapters in detail. I also, you see in chapter 5 here, I say the enclave group. In enclave, the enclave group is a very interesting small group of also American scholars who read postmodernism and post-structuralism, but in a very different way, in a very interesting way. So here, I should say, part of my book and my desire was to highlight the work of scholars whom I found very interesting and insightful examples of nursing scholarship. And so what I do with Enclave Group is emphasizing and highlighting their work, saying these are interesting examples, but they have never become, they were on the margins of American nursing theory, criticizing American nursing theory, and yet they have never been included in those compendiums of American nursing theory either. So let me, what you will see on the next two slides, I will skip this, I already described, this can be another discussion. I go through each of these American nurse theorists and I show what is the gist of their work, how they have drawn on postmodernism and post-structuralism, always for the purpose of bolstering those established ideas, not troubling them, but always bolstering those ideas. Then coming to chapter 6, I present a very contrasting. Now I turn away from American nursing theory landscape and I turn to a contrasting examples. How postmodern and post-structural ideas appeared in non-American nursing literature. And I provide two pioneering examples. One work of Carl May, examining nurse-patient relationships, and another example is the work of Siobhan Nelson. Again, briefly to summarize, Siobhan Nelson focused on the holistic nurse through a historical lens. And here we see it's an example of Foucault-informed scholarship, which is completely different. It does not utilize this framework, does not utilize the terminology that Riesjord found so problematic. These non-American writings, they are not stuck on bolstering the idea of unique nursing science. They are focused on nursing practice, and they view nursing practice as a social accomplishment and its historical context. And so it's historicized and contextualized view of nursing practice that is so refreshing and different from the examples I described earlier. Again, I will not, basically in one sentence, the summary of Siobhan Nelson's book was that she challenges holistic nursing theory and a figure of holistic nurse that dominates for the last few decades, dominates the landscape of our conversations in a classroom. She says that maybe it's inadequate to only talk about single preferable figure of a nurse as being a holistic nurse. And it's an interesting analysis she does in the book. And finally, in the concluding chapter, I summarized all points I made in the book. And here are some concluding thoughts. I'm asking, where is nursing practice in nursing theory? And some good examples that I highlighted throughout the book indeed focus on practice. My discussions in the book invite attention to socio-materiality of nursing practice and shows that social theory and contemporary philosophy can be helpful in understanding this socio-materiality. Also, maybe one of the conclusions is calls for us to be curious, to attend events like this one, to expand our horizons from maybe our primary focus of our research and scholarship, to be inquisitive and curious about what is it that is done by other people, maybe in the circles like nursing philosophy. And do not be afraid of theoretical anti-humanism. Also, one of the conclusions arising from the book is limitations of some of those categories that strictly position some work as nursing theory, other work as nursing philosophy, and so on. And as I said, highlighting some examples of nursing scholarship that I personally found very inspiring and rigorous. And again, returning to the questions that animate the whole book. And I am grateful Mary Ellen Perkins wrote a foreword to the book. And I think even foreword is so amazing, it's worth reading it. And she talks about these questions. Oh, I'll give you a minute to go through this quote. Siobhan Nelson articulated this in 1995, and I find it a very interesting quote indeed. And that's what was my specific focus on post-structural nursing theory and the work of Foucault, which I felt has the opportunity, this theoretical orientation, once brought into the to bear on the understanding of nursing practice, had the opportunity to open up the appreciation of complexities of nursing practice, but in the American nursing theoretical discourse, this did not happen. And so I, again, really like this quote. Now let me progress the slides. And that's all. What thank you very much. Martin, to you now.
Olga. Yes. Yes. Hold on a second. More button pressing in train. Okay. As I knew it would be very interesting. Thank you. Okay, in a minute we'll take some questions. I'd be surprised if we didn't have questions about the linkage, assuming that linkage exists between theory and practice. But before then, let me ask a question of my own. In our discussion before this meeting, you noted that the questions I have about what you say are, of course, influenced by my own interests. That's correct. How could it be other? Okay, given that, you offer a very critique of how ideas here, Foucauldian ideas and others have been ignored and or however, and here my own interests are manifest. However, since nurses are not professional or trained philosophers or sociologists or whatever, how realistically are nurses to recognize potentially useful ideas emanating outside of nursing, ideas in philosophy or sociology or wherever? And if potentially useful ideas are recognized, can we bring those ideas into nursing, ultimately into nursing practice, perhaps, without risking emasculating or debasing them? Foucault's writings, for example, are and will continue to be debated and argued over by philosophers and sociologists. However, nurses who are not themselves trained philosophers and sociologists, how can they keep abreast of these debates? And just to be clear, I stand with Drummond on the need or benefit of including borrowed theory in nursing, but my assumption is that in asking my question, my assumption is that we need some sort of ongoing immersion in the literature of these disciplines if we're to keep up to date with thinking about here Foucault. So if we accept the argument of your book, and I do, a whole batch of new problems demand attention. Have you given thought to these problems, these new questions at all?
Yes, Martin, thank you. So this it will be I will be dishonest if I was to say Oh yes, we should keep abreast with all developments, in social sciences and humanities, and we are able to read all, every book published, every current. No, it's not what is. It might be possible for some people within nursing, I find, and this has been the topic discussed frequently in our nursing philosophy webinars, how much the nursing scholarship, academic, let's say, nursing scholarship, even what I do as a specific example, how much it is shaped by overarching climate in the academia, right? There are demands, certain requirements to produce research that will be funded, right? And so our attention is directed almost away from dwelling into what some can describe as lofty theoretical or philosophical ideas. And so then, to me, I think I always like to think about it as a possibility of finding some middle ground, a possibility of expanding one's horizons even within even modestly. For example, instructors teaching the courses, if they're curious enough to attend events like that, or they might realize there is research articles that can look very differently from the structure of research report that we see in a typical nursing journal, right? Exposing learners to examples that are different, to a variety of examples. That's one, I think, something that can realistically be done. Then also, it surprises me working with some PhD students that once that all of a sudden you come across a student who actually the student might be very practical, working as a nurse and very kind of standing on the ground with 2 feet. And yet this person says, wait, I am not interested in pursuing grants. I would like to pursue my passion. And my passion is, I don't know, German critical philosophy. My passion is actor network theory, and everything else can wait. And I will invest my time and energy in reading this work. So it does happen as well. And I think it's good when a faculty can recognize this interest, which might not be molded into established pattern, right? That you do your PhD within 4 years, you do certain work. So I do see some possibilities. It is hard. Your question, I know, is well informed from your own teaching and how you make your modules and you cut down the material to the most bottom line. It's an ongoing question. And I'm wondering if we can open this, even if there is a possibility to do that, to the audience, if other educators or students, if there are examples that can be shared.
Okay, thank you. Paul has had his hand up, so I'll bring him in a second. But Savina says, it strikes me that nursing scholars spent 60 plus years constructing a discipline of nursing, and the project now is to deconstruct what was so painstakingly constructed. And that seems to be an expected trajectory, opening a new world of possibilities. That's an interesting comment, Savina. Do you want to add anything to that? If you do, just say, and I shall unmute you, and if not, I won't.
Not really, not really, but thanks for the opportunity.
Oh, okay, all right. Paul.
Thanks, Martin. Hi, Olga. Nice to see you. Can you hear me?
Yes, Paul. Yes. Hi. Good to see you.
First of all, I've got to say I had to wait for the paperback, so my copy only came yesterday, actually, available in paperback in the UK from yesterday, and so I've not read through it. So I'm just probably about to say something that's in here. So if I do, please don't get exasperated. But there are a couple of things. One is when we talk, often people talk about nurse scholars, and I don't really know what that is. What is a nurse scholar? Things most people who are teaching nursing don't publish here anyway, don't publish in journals. Certainly don't publish in philosophy journals. So when we're talking about this sort of thing, I keep coming back to this, and I've been coming back to it for years, and I can't get an answer. Who do we think we're talking to? So that's the first thing. Are we talking to people who go to IPON's conference? Are we talking to people who say they read nursing philosophy, or ones that actually do? And further and further, and how does this stuff get from your head to my students? That's the thing. How does it get to them? And then if it does get to them, what difference does it make when they turn up to work tomorrow on their early shift? This is the thing. Now, and your work, as I understand what you've been saying, is more of a criticism of it than an explanation of it. But can you just say a bit about that? And I'm putting aside. I noticed that quickly skimming through the book that the notion of American exceptionalism. I mean, we have our own sort of British exceptionalism over here, so I'm putting that to one side. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, thank you very much, Paul. That's a great question. Yes, maybe two parts. One is nurse scholars. It's an interesting observation. You are right. That's kind of phrase I think I am using extensively, partly because I think of the convention. It's just a shorthand to indicate something, right? In this case, in the book specifically, I go with how people called themselves, right? American nurse theorists is what they designated themselves. They published books, so that's I go with that. Those other nurse scholars, people who work in the academia, I think in the case of the book, it refers to nursing faculty. It refers to nurse educators, yes, working in educational settings, people who reflect on what they do, whether it is practice of education or clinical nursing practice of research, administration, anyone who is a professional, considers themselves a professional, reflects on their practice. So that's kind of broadly on how to go, and then specifically about labels attached to those other non-American nurse scholars who cited Foucault. Those I purely go again with how they described themselves. Some were saying we are nurse philosophers, others were not attached, although we know lots of people who attended IPON's conferences, right, who would never call themselves nurse philosophers and so on. This is on the aspect of language purely. But now back, I think, to what was of essence to you is I think we are in a good place here because you are the bridge. You are at this event and you asked, what's the bridge between me and my book and your students? You are. So what I think, if I were to bring this down to one takeaway, if I were to give a 30-second elevator speech, and you asked me what is it I can do differently, right, for the students, so what, and maybe you're already doing that. I would say ask your students to describe what they do in their workday, in their practice. It's what I found, and I see some of my master students, I think in this event, I think they might agree. It's actually very different to describe step by like minute by minute, what is it that you do exactly, right? We are trained to go into, oh, I'm providing patient-centered care. I'm excellent team worker and I'm collaborating with my interdisciplinary team, right? And I say, wait a second, tell me what is it exactly, right? Without bringing it to that that discourse of either holistic nursing practice or something else that is established ways to think about nursing practice through the literature. So, and paying attention to the socio-materiality, how do you use objects? What is the role of objects? Maybe, hold on, now you told me about your intentions or what you meant to do. Now, what if you don't use the language of intentions or plans, but you say, what is it you have done? You describe events. That's one way to maybe start to think differently about practice. What comes to your mind, Paul? Oh, I think you are muted.
I think you talk about master students, and your master students. Did you say they were in the room? I mean, I think that's one of the things in my personal experience where I work. We have very few. It's really for undergraduate nurses, but it always seems to me that in many areas of nursing scholarship, I'm going to use that word now, it's more directed at advanced practice rather than pre-registration practice. And yet most nurses who qualify stay at the level over here of a kind of their bands are band 5 and 6, so they're fairly junior nurses. They do have the notion of individual accountability, but they're working on wards, and in a general sense they're not advanced practitioners. And I think also in the UK, this is one of the interesting things about the geographical location of your critique. We kind of ditched theories along. It had about the time Martin and I were training. They had their moment in the sun, and very soon after it was ditched. So a couple of things from that. One is that nursing, we use the same word, but I think it's very different in different parts of the world, and it's also very different at different levels of scholarship, of practice rather, between when people are newly qualified and people who are more senior and more learned. And sometimes I think that we call nursing, we bring all of that under the general term nursing, and things at the extremes are so different. It's almost not the same thing.
That's right. How about that? So one, again, something is between the lines in this book, or maybe even explicitly. I am citing Davina Allen's work for sure, her Invisible Nurses work. Now she has, I think she recently published a textbook for undergraduate students, right? Her book, Invisible Nurses Work, I read with master students. It's the great strength of this book is that it resonates, right? There is no question. That's a book to me that closes the gap between theory and practice, right? When theory is used in that way to analyze practice in a way that resonates with clinicians, that's to me a great example of closing the gap. And now I think she wrote a book for undergraduate students. I haven't looked at it yet, but it looks promising to me. So let me know if you.
Very briefly, one last. Sorry, Mary Ellen's got her hand up, so I'm just going to be very, very, very brief. And the other thing is, if you ask patients, they don't always distinguish between people, and a lot of people who patients think are nurses aren't nurses. They're associate nurses or healthcare assistants. And I think people sometimes we talk about nursing as an activity and a thing that's kind of separate from the people actually doing it. Perhaps some of these people wouldn't recognise what they're doing. I don't think I articulated that very well, but it's a curious thing. I'll leave it at that and get off and let someone else talk. Sorry.
Yes. Thank you very much, Paul. Yes.
Mary Ellen, did you want to come in?
Do I need to? There. Okay, and then I guess I can share my video too. There, maybe we'll see if that. Can you see me, Olga?
Yes, Mary Ellen. Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. This has been wonderful, and I've really enjoyed this conversation. And my question that I had, Paul has exactly kind of set up a preliminary to that. I am this evening. I am attending a little session here in town in Victoria. That's highlighting what they're calling a new model of care at a brand new seniors facility that's being built currently up at the north end of the island. And when I listen to you, I think, and when I hear Paul talking about, what is nursing practice, what is nursing care, much of the care in this new model that's being proposed this evening at this session that I'm going to will be conducted by healthcare assistants, folks with perhaps just maybe 6 months to a year's worth of educational background, if that. And I think, as Paul says, the really important thing is, to my way of thinking, is what is it that people actually experience as care when I'm particularly interested now in seniors care, as you know, but when people are being cared for and cared for in a model that's trying very hard not to be so institutionalized. So, it isn't about everybody gets down to the dining room at the same time and everybody gets fed the same meal. And there's a lot of feeding of older adults just because it's quicker. And then nurses, however, whatever category they actually are, can get on with other work. I think what you're describing as a methodology for examining the practices that are planfully implemented to provide care to people. In some ways, it matters less who's doing it, as much as us understanding what those practices are and having a language to articulate what are those practices, what are the ones that seem to be working the best for people. And then for our purposes, as people who have educated registered nurses here in this country, perhaps advanced practice nurses in other places, what is the relationship between those people and those that are at the very front line actually doing this care? Because I think maybe going back to Savina's original point, there is a point to thinking about that scholarship of nursing that has developed over decades. And I think what the real value of your work is that while you have criticized the what has not been presented as legitimate scholarship, you've created a space for us to think about broadening out what might be considered legitimate scholarship. And I think it's awfully important that the people who will be directing the care, perhaps more and more and more, registered nurses will direct the care. But if they don't understand what that practice is, then I feel less confident that they will be able to actually direct good care at the front line, and that the people that are receiving that care will feel cared for. There, that's my little rant. And I don't know if you want to comment on that, but anyway, kudos to you. And thank you so very much for all of your work. And please just keep producing it.
Thank you very much, Mary Ellen. That's very, very, yes, very insightful comment. And as I said earlier, I would just buy this book purely to read your foreword. I thought it's so amazing. So, Mary Ellen, it's what you said is just, I think, very well thought through, and years of thinking about and being so closely through personal experiences, through working with clinicians, through layers of administrative, like all your experiences, I think are encapsulated in that. One thing I heard you say, what I think like you would be banished from some circles because you said it doesn't matter who is doing this caring work. Right? That's part of the issue, was that all this, especially American nursing scholarship, and this continues, right? Yeah. Nurse scholars are very against the idea, right? That is a threat. The boundaries of the nursing are being eroded, and let's create a philosophy, this foundational set of ideas that will somehow guide practice. What happens in reality that each nursing student is brilliant in linking Peggy Chin's, Jean Watson's, Rosemary Parsi ideas linking into nursing, examples of nursing practice. But it's purely rhetorical exercise, which I don't think has any implications in practice, as opposed to what you described, how understanding practice, who is doing what, how this can be arranged, right? It both addresses the financial pressures, right? And what we see, continual renegotiation of care models, which is there, it's happening. And instead of trying to close eyes, right, to that, is recognizing that that's what it is right now, and thinking what is the best socio-material arrangements that can be made. So that what another thing I have heard, you did not use this word, but it's tinkering, right? What Anne-Marie Moll uses. Tinkering comes from use of, again, material objects, technology, human agents, in the best way possible to create a set of arrangements that is perceived as care being provided by the recipient.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And that's a terrific kind of reference out to Anne-Marie Moll's work as well as Jeanette Paul's really excellent work on looking at, I think it's Anne-Marie or Jeanette Paul's that talks about good enough care. And that's, I mean, it sounds minimal. It's actually really, really, really good because it's thoughtful, right? It is people thinking through their practices, thinking through the tiny ways that they tinker to make things a little bit better for someone. And I think when I first started into really thinking about seniors care, it was when I talked with some people who they were just trying different things to make life better for a group of older women who, they had committed themselves to, and getting to understand them in some ways that they could just make a tiny change to someone's everyday processes so that it just made it easier for them. It just made it better for them. And that seems like that would be a really good outcome when I see kind of seniors care en masse. And it isn't really very good in some places for an awful lot of people, and it could just be a lot better if just small things got tinkered with. So thank you.
Thank you very much,
I'll move it
Marilyn.
on to someone else.
Olga, I know that quite a few people will now have to leave because we're now running into the work day, depending on where people are. So let me say once again, it's a very interesting book. Thank you for outlining your arguments. I recommend everyone should ask their library to obtain a copy of your book, perhaps several copies. And thank you to everyone who made time to be here today. And as I said, the recording will be available quite shortly, should anyone wish to revisit it. And I think I think it's worth saying that now, so that if and when people have to leave, the thanks have been given. Now, that said, does anyone else have any questions or comments they'd like to throw into the mix? Please do use the chat box if you would like to. Otherwise, thank you for everyone for attending.
Thank you very much, Martin.
Okay. Paul, have you popped your hand up again, or is that a legacy hand?
No, I popped it up again. Are we staying chatting or
Yes,
going
yeah.
home?
I just wanted to give people I can see people are leaving because now we're running into the work day in North America. Yeah,
okay.
and I just wanted to get the thanks in.
Can I ask
okay.
Olga another thing then?
Fire away.
Yes, go ahead.
I mean, Olga, I've not read your book yet, so I might be saying something really stupid, and if I am, you'll just have to tell me, okay? So, if as I understood this, your book is a kind of criticism of the way it's been used. That's right. You're not arguing for it. It's a kind of criticism of what's happened historically.
It's a rather feisty criticism.
Yeah.
Criticism. Sorry, Paul, I missed criticism of what did you say?
As I understood your book, and I say I don't know if you heard at the beginning. I've not read it yet, so the good thing about your book is it's nice and short, so I can usually read books like that, although it takes me a long time. As I understood you to be saying, listening to what you're saying, what you're saying is a criticism of how certain theories were used a while ago. So I kind of, and then building on that from my observation that, you know, in the UK we've seems to have ditched the whole narrative of nursing theories, and we just don't teach it. It's just forgotten. We you know, there's a checklist derived from certain models, but theories have just disappeared from the curriculum. Do you think there is value in these theories, even though you're saying that people use them wrongly? What is the value in them? And why do you think that there's such a difference between the different sides of the Atlantic in how they're used in education and practice?
Interesting question. Many parts, I think, to that question. I think, yes, I talk a little bit about that in the book, about historical kind of context, why nursing theory movement happened, right? I talk briefly and I partly draw on Riesjord for that. In the United States, as I think the story goes, in the United States, nursing moved from hospital schools of nursing, right, from the apprenticeship model to the universities much earlier than in other parts of the world. And so in the 50s and 60s, when nurses in the United States entered into the university and had to produce a discourse, right, academic body of writings, a body of knowledge that would be at par with what is done in other departments, right? That developing theory and doing research was that type of academic activity, right? That nurse academics would do. And so, and as Riesjord speculates, or he supports actually his claim with observations, is that nurses started citing in the United States, started citing philosophy of science, that logical positivism that was prevalent in philosophy of science mid-20th century. And so that's how ideas of what is theory and that science has to have something called theory, that a scientific work is a collection of theories, and that theories look at in a particular way. Levels of hierarchy, this pyramid model, and so on. All those ideas were very influential early on in the American academy. In other countries, in the UK, in Australia, Canada, when nursing moved to the academy, to the these were different types of socio-political, environment. Ideas of evidence-based practice, right, and some other that shaped also what is considered most important. Also, what I talk about in the book is looking at how theory, a little bit, that's not a big part, but I do mention it in a couple of places, how theory, American nursing theory, has actually been used. What I see around myself, and when I was a student, we had to coach, we had to use language of those models to describe clinical examples, right? So that was the way to produce some sort of account of what happens in practice, right? Educators, many educational programs across United States and Canada have actually adopted American nursing theory as a guiding curricular framework. Like Sister Callista's Roy adaptation model was guiding a curricula, the whole undergraduate curricula in one university where I was a student. Jean Watson's caring theory was guiding the whole curricular development in another program, right? So that's how what was done actually with those. Now, what I see now, American nursing theory is still used in some places in the United States and quite thriving in some places. It's used to write up a section on your theoretical foundations, right? On your theoretical framework. You kind of, it's in a way an easy model that can be used, plugged into to guide your research or to guide your curriculum development. That's what is done in terms of American nursing theory. Continental philosophy is very different, right? And I'm specifically talking about continental philosophy and more about current, which is very different, right? It's not easy, it's not nuggetable, to use a word somebody has said. You cannot distill it into one very practical instrumental set of ideas, right? To plug it into your, it's something, it does a very different thing. It opens up, it makes you question the foundations or question your taken for granted assumptions. And whether and how it is important, I think, is a big question to ask the society. Do we want to trouble our foundations? It's the same question I see in the classroom. Do we want to do it? Do we need to do it? And so that's a much larger question. In terms of specific, as I think I liked what Mary Ellen said, that yes, it is a sort of criticism of American nursing theory in the way it is closed upon itself. It's only interested in perpetuating its own dogmas, right? And I use pure example of post-structuralism because it is so different. It's non-humanistic set of ideas. And so showing how they are cut off, they cannot be, they are invisible and unintelligible within this matrix of American nursing theory. But this can happen to other sets of ideas as well, once they are not coached into the language of holistic nurse or emancipatory agenda, right? They will not be heard.
I think that's a good answer, Olga. I think because if you're going to say it's as you said it, and we had similar stuff in the UK. We did, and it did seem to be kind of self-regarding in a sense. Look, we're in the academy and we've got to behave like we're in the academy, and there'd be a kind of chain of argument that eventually ended up with the conclusion, and therefore the care will be better. And I'm not quite sure that how you could show that, or whether anyone has tried to show that. But maybe that was just something that we had to go through. Maybe it was of its time, and now we've moved on. But I like your idea of questioning your assumptions. I think that's a really good way of putting it. And going into a class of students and say, well, what do you think you're doing when you're nursing someone? But that's a kind of the kind of the opposite of saying, look, here's the theory we're applying. You've got to do it like this, isn't it? You're really just asking people to be thoughtful. And I mean, who's going to object to that? We just starting a general election over here. Do you know what I mean? You go out and we're going to see debate after the telly where no one's even began to ask that question. What do you think this is? So I think that's a really good answer. But it's almost like building your own theory rather than saying, look, we're signed up to this one or this one or this one, which always just seems slightly odd to me.
Right, or even that. Trying to, even at the descriptive level, right, to somehow come down from, step aside from the ways we used to talk about nursing, right, but to see what is it I am doing and trying to understand what are the effects of this doing, and not thinking that all my practice or knowledge is located in the mind, right? It's that idea of distributed knowledge, that objects play a big role. And so the idea of then tinkering or arrangements conducive to better outcomes will take account of all these different elements that are important. I'll give you one example, something I think is a good example, but again, sometimes I'm surprised how difficult it is to channel students even to talk about it. Like in Canada, we have this truth and reconciliation processes with indigenous populations going on, and in British Columbia in particular, a very significant issue of systemic indigenous racism, and so addressing these issues in healthcare and nurses working with indigenous peoples, like a big focus of attention from governments, right, from grassroots organizations, and in nursing curricula, this is a big topic now. So in the hospital, right, we say we want to be attuned to culture and patient-centered. For indigenous peoples who want to have, let's say, sweetgrass ceremony, it requires making, like it would violate fire regulations in the hospital, right? They need to have this smudging ceremony, which involves using fire or, you know, smoke, like things which hospital is not set up for. But in many hospitals, there is a desire to accommodate indigenous and recognize the importance of spiritual practices, of ceremonies. And so that's a socio-material arrangement. You need a room in a hospital that has windows, that you can open the windows. So your notion of patient-centeredness actually directly relates to hospital having a room where you can open windows and fire regulations be relaxed in that regard, right? So that that's what a good patient care is. It involves thinking about what arrangements are necessary.
Thank you, Olga. I think I've just. I think I'll come back when I've read the book. I think it's. That's the trouble with these book reviews, book launches, isn't it? You want to do another one in 6 months, Martin, and when we've all read it, we'll come back.
Yeah, Paul, you might want to do one in 6 months' time. I shall be retired. And,
Yeah.
yeah.
You can't fish every day, Martin.
I don't know about that. I can do lunchtime drinking. Okay, everyone. Shall we? Oh, I'll stop recording.